Again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tarnika Manning, the Administrative Director for the Office of Equity and Minority Health here at the Lurie Cancer Center. And I want to welcome you to our third and final session of Finances and Health. We have Aaron Bear again here with us to talk us through how to get organized. So again, there's so many documents that cancer patients get when they are going through the diagnosis. And so not even just from the medical center, but just the tax documents and from the insurance companies. And so there's so many things that you have to keep track of and stay organized. And so Aaron's going to walk us through that this afternoon. So as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We usually have a good small group here. So if you have some questions, feel free to raise your hands and Aaron can answer any questions that you may have. So take it away, Aaron.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be back here again. Yeah, today we're going to be looking at how to get organized and be financially prepared. I wanted to tell you first a little bit about Triage Cancer for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. We are a national nonprofit organization, and we provide free education on the legal and practical issues that could impact someone with a cancer diagnosis and their caregivers. And we have a lot of wonderful resources on our website. I will point to them as we go through, where I note that we have corresponding materials, but there are a lot of different resources online. I would encourage you to come check out our website at triagecancer.org and take a look and peruse through our offerings. So in an ideal world, I think we would have been taught certain, I like to think of them as adulting skills back in high school. There are certain things that I wish that we were taught. They taught us in school that we'll be looking at today, things as they touch upon with health insurance and finances, estate planning. And I can't say they necessarily spark joy if you've been a fan of Marie Kondo and you know that that's kind of her catch line. There are a lot of great reasons why getting organized is appealing and it's worth the investment. I mean, first of all, it means we're more likely to get what we need. It's also more likely we're going to reduce our stress at a stressful time, which is likely going to have a result in increased health. It'll also help us feel like we're more in control of the situation, feel empowered to make different changes. It's going to help our financial bottom line, and it's going to also help protect our loved ones. I want to recognize that none of this is a one-size-fits-all approach, and that everyone today might be coming from a different place. You could be in the middle of treatment and are just trying to stay above water, or maybe you're coming out of treatment and finishing up and trying to get back on track. Or maybe you're here today to help somebody else. I also recognize that some of the suggestions that we talk about may not resonate. Either that might be costly or they utilize technology that you might not feel comfortable with. So I'm going to do my best as we go through to provide multiple solutions, multiple suggestions, so that something hopefully will resonate with you and you'll be able to take it with you from here. Speaking of which, as far as technology is concerned, I totally understand that some people are more comfortable with technology than others. And there is a great digital divide in terms of access to technology in this country. However, for folks who do have access even to a smartphone, there are some really great tools that we'll be talking about, whether that's email or calendars or file storage. And we are at a time right now when a lot of systems kind of require us to have an email account. So at this point, whether we are signing up for health insurance or trying to access our online hospital system records, even trying to find out our benefits through Social Security, often require an email. So it can be a very valuable tool. The email account itself is free, but it's not all free. There are certainly costs associated with using email. You'll need a device to view your emails on, and you'll need internet or cell service in order to access these programs. But I wanted to let you know that there are resources in place where you can get access for free. Certainly like the library or potentially a community center in your neighborhood. And then there are also programs that can help provide you with some of the technology. Goodwill has a computer program. There's also the Lifeline Assistance Program, which provides phones for seniors, and the Affordable Connectivity Program, which can provide free or low-cost internet access. And in most cities, you can find out more by dialing 211. And while there are many upsides to email, one of the downsides is junk and clutter. Just like we get a lot of junk mail in our literal mailbox, we get a lot of it in our digital mailbox too. And so dealing with that clutter, we want to deal with it as soon as it comes in. And so some things that we do maybe for our online email accounts, some things to consider are there are websites that will help you unroll from junk email, like Unroll Me. And some folks have the strategy where they will have a specific email just to use for things that they think are going to trigger spam or junk email. Of course, email isn't the only way that we might receive junk mail. A lot of it comes directly into our physical inbox. There are some ways to cut that down. It's a low-cost option, but it's not free to go to Direct Marketing Association's consumer website, which will help you get off mailing lists and receive less junk mail. And then a big piece of navigating and being organized is to like triage mail as soon as it comes through the door. So when it comes through, I recommend, I don't even want to put it down on my table. I'm going to the first things first. I'm going to put in. Someone have a question? Oh, no. Okay. So to deal with it immediately, maybe put recycling straight into the bin, and then maybe I'll categorize. I think it's helpful to have a filing system right by where I sort my mail to put in what I'm going to need to deal with right away. And what are things that maybe I can scan and categorize for later. And the reality is even having health insurance isn't going to completely eliminate medical bills. And so a lot of times when we're dealing with medical bills, we might feel like the person sitting on this bench saying to his friend, my doctor told me to avoid any unnecessary stress, so I didn't open his bill. And while it's certainly an interesting coping strategy and not one we necessarily recommend, there are things that we can do to stay organized and reduce the burden of bills. Some of it that's helpful is to know the process. So just from our insurance company alone, we're likely to get 3 pieces of mail. One saying that they've received a claim, one saying they're processing a claim, and then one called an explanation of benefits, or EOB. And you can usually tell it's an EOB because somewhere on it, it will say, this is not a bill. But those will give you an idea of how much you're going to have to pay out of pocket for your visit. And I fully acknowledge that explanation of benefits, or EOBs, can be a bit challenging to decipher. So we'll take a look at a sample together. So this is an illustration of the types of information you might find on an EOB. And every insurance company is going to present that information in a slightly different way. So it might look a little bit different. But it all should have kind of this minimum level of information. And like I said, the first telltale sign on an EOB is that it says this is not a bill. So we can see from looking at this slide, we can see who the policy holder is and who the claim is for. In this case, it's a policy and claim for Ida. We can see a summary of the claim, which includes the date of service, a description, oftentimes a CPT code or billing code. You'll then see the amount that they bill to your insurance company, Then the allowed amount, and that's basically the allowed amount is what the insurance company and provider have agreed to pay beforehand or contracted to pay. And then you'll likely be responsible for the difference. And so here you can see that the insurance company agreed to pay $75 for this claim for routine services. And then in the next column, it shows that Ida is responsible for $5 for this visit. So it'll tell you what you're responsible for. And the last piece of information you may get is going to be from your provider directly, and that's the bill. And that's often going to be from the hospital where you got care, or your doctor's office, or maybe it's a lab. One of the challenging things about this is that whether you're receiving these communications from email or whether you're receiving these communications from snail mail, these things don't always come in the same order. So we would expect the insurance company to process the claim, let us know, and then we get billed. But a lot of times it doesn't happen in that order. And our doctors and hospitals are faster to bill us than our insurance company can be at sending us our explanation of benefits. So why does this matter? Well, if someone gets a bill before they get their EOB and they pay it and then get their EOB, they might find that they've actually paid more than they needed to. And so now you have to go back to your provider and ask for that money back, which is a huge headache. So generally speaking, it's a good idea to wait until you get your EOB before you pay your bill to make sure that you're paying the right amount. However, with the caveat, I will say that it's important to communicate with your providers about what's happening. You don't want to wait until the due date comes and goes without communicating with them, because then they might think that you're just not going to pay at all and might send you into collections. So what we typically recommend doing in this situation is I would call up my provider. I would say, hey, I haven't gotten my EOB yet. Can you push back the due date, or can you make a note in my file? And to date, I have not heard of any problems with this strategy. So definitely stay in communication and wait for that EOB. I also wanted to let you know about $4, which is a fantastic organization. Basically, any nonprofit hospital that you go to is required to offer financial assistance called charity care, either for giving bills or implementing a sliding scale based on somebody's ability to pay. And to find out if your hospital has such a program, you can visit the $4 website. We at Triage Cancer, one of the many resources that we have on our website is a medical bill tracker. And it's a worksheet you can download to help you keep track of your bills. And it's nice because you can enter the specifics about your specific health insurance plan. So you can put in your deductible and enter your out-of-pocket maximum. And then below, when you enter in the information from your bill, all the necessary things, not only are you keeping track then of your bills, but also this worksheet is going to keep track of how much left you have to pay towards your deductible and how much you have left to pay towards your out-of-pocket maximum. So this tool can really simplify things and is available on our website. It's a really good idea to keep records of the medical bills, keep records of the payments you've made, keep records of your EOBs, even, definitely keep records of your pre-authorizations or anything that has to do with appeals, but even any expenses that have to do with meals or travel costs. And one reason you want to keep it all in one place is because you might need it, especially if you do need to appeal a claim. Having everything in one place is going to spare you a great deal of headaches if you have maybe a binder where you can put everything in. You'll also need to keep records if you're submitting bills to health savings accounts or if you have a flexible spending account. Taxes are another reason to keep records, which we'll talk about in a second. And just so you know, when we're talking taxes, we want to keep our records for a minimum of 3 years in the event we're audited by the IRS, although hopefully that will never happen to any of us. And to be on the safe side, we might want to keep those records for 6 years. And in looking at taxes, it's helpful to know a couple of terms. So keep in mind that there's both earned income, like salary from work or unemployment benefits, and then there's unearned income, like interest or rents or alimony. Deductions are expenses that reduce the total amount of income that will be taxed. Credits reduce how much tax is owed. And just so you know, not everybody does owe, not everybody earns enough that they have to file their taxes. But if you do, note that there are many ways to do so. You don't have to hire a professional, you certainly can. There are free and low cost options. And one that I wanted to let you know about or point out is available through the IRS, and it's called the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. And that is free help with filing your taxes. Next up, we're going to talk for the digital minded, we're going to look a little bit about how to keep files on our computer organized. So just like anywhere else in, say, my household, my laptop can become really cluttered. And a great way to avoid this is to really make use of folders. And I will be the first to admit, I have a bad habit of saving my files to my desktop on my computer, and then my desktop is an absolute and total mess. So instead, we suggest creating folders. And so as you can see, an example here would be not only is there a bills folder, but there are subfolders for the type of bills so that I can find them quickly. So here specifically house bills, medical bills, and school loans. And then within that subfolder, like medical bills, you might want to consider how you name your file. So having the date of the visit can be really helpful, as well as maybe like a word or two of type of visit that it was. And don't forget, we do have that appeals tracker on our website. We have the medical bills tracker that we talked about, and we also have an appeals tracking form on our website. And then one thing to keep in mind too is that it can really help to organize your online folders, not just by subtypes of type of bills, but the year that we're talking about, especially when it comes to the end of the year when we have to do our taxes or come April 15th. So separating the bills out not only by type, but by time period can also help keep you organized. We also recommend compiling an inventory of all the different types of insurance that you would have access to. And a big part of that is also being familiar with the plan, knowing, for example, how your deductibles are met, or being able to look and create a forecast and budget based on what you know about your health plan. For example, a lot of times the beginning of the year, medical expenses might be higher because you haven't reached that deductible yet. So you might want to budget differently for the beginning of the year until you do meet your deductible. But first you have to know what your deductible is. So going through your policies and making sure that you understand. Also, by regularly reviewing your insurance plans, you'll also be in better shape to see what changes you might need to make, because there are changes in health insurance every year that we want to be staying on top of. We also want to have a general idea of our financial big picture. And our financial big picture is basically a list of all our assets and all our liabilities. So they're both wide-ranging. Assets can include bank accounts, they can include retirement accounts, property, including real property, basically anything of value. And your liabilities are all the debts. And when you subtract all of your liabilities from your assets, that will tell you what your net worth is. And so once you've created this, you have a good sense of your financial big picture, and it makes it easier then to get organized. And a big piece of getting organized is creating a budget. And so when we create a budget, the first step we're going to want to take is to select a method. And there are a lot of methods, there are a lot of options. There's a good reason why the cash envelope system has been around for years. But there are also newer ones like apps and software you can use on your computer or online. And then the next step is to identify all the income that you have coming in, which should be pretty easy if you've done that first step of creating your financial big picture using that document, which is also available on the website. Step 3 is identifying all the expenses, and there are 6 categories that most people have in their situations. I will say this, sometimes when we're creating budgets, we try to be the best version of ourselves, and we don't include things that we do like to potentially spend money on because we think that we shouldn't be spending money on them. For example, I know someone who loves to get her nails done and every 2 weeks. And it really helps keep her going. It's her main way of self-care. But she was embarrassed to admit this because she was also struggling financially. And I want to make it clear that when we're creating a budget, this isn't about passing judgment about what we should or shouldn't be spending money on. We need to look at what's important for us and take that into account. So in that situation, we were looking at the budget and seeing maybe some other things that weren't as high a priority. We were able to cut her cable bill down, and then she was able to fit in the expenses for the manicures. So I'd like to give people permission to be realistic and empower people to do their budget in a way that's going to have real value for them. It's totally understandable if you feel uncomfortable with the idea of doing a budget by yourself, or maybe it's just overwhelming. So just so you know, there are financial planners that might be able to help you, and they work with folks of all different income levels. You don't have to feel like you need to be rich in order to use a financial planner. You can visit the National Financial Planning Association to find a planner in your area. And it's good to note that a lot of times financial planners will provide you with a free consultation, and there would be no commitment for that first meeting. You could also consider contacting a consumer credit counseling agency, and they can be great at providing different tools or calculators and other resources, and they may be able to help you negotiate either payment plans or settle with your creditors for less. But remember that these debt solutions can negatively affect your credit score. So this is one of those personal decisions that maybe you know that you won't be needing credit anytime soon. Maybe you have a mortgage, you already have your house, you already have a brand new car. So maybe it's a smarter decision for you to financially reduce your debt and absorb that 7 to 10 year hit on your credit to reduce your debt now and pay less in the long run. But I'm always going to encourage you to talk with a professional before you make that decision, because, for many of us, it's challenging to know where we're going to be in life in 7 years. Also, part of figuring out our financial big picture, we must know what our credit looks like. And there are 2 things we need to check. There's our credit score and our credit report. A credit score is a 3-digit number determined by looking at 5 main categories of your financial history. They're going to look at debts owed, new credit, length of your credit history, the types of credit used, and your payment history. And the score is then used to let lenders know kind of your credit worthiness, or predict your financial risk. The most widely used credit score is FICO. The scores range from between 300 to 850, with a higher number indicating better credit or more credit worthiness. And just so you know, of the 3 of the three credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, you might have a different credit score with each one. So what does it matter if you have a lower credit score? It can impact your ability to get a mortgage, car loan, or credit card. And if you are able to get that loan, if you have a lower credit score, chances are you will only get approved at a higher interest rate for that loan, and it'll be more expensive. But your score is only one part of the picture. You want to take a look at your credit report as well. The things on the report are what the bureaus look at to determine your score. And reason why we want to pull our credit report is that we want to make sure everything on it's accurate. Sometimes it's not. And just so you know, every time your credit gets checked, it can affect your credit. And people are surprised to learn that your credit might be checked when you rent an apartment, when you lease or buy a car, when you buy a home, even when you get cable television, you could have your credit checked. Even some employers may conduct background checks that include looking at your credit score or your full credit report. Thankfully, of all the different things we talk about today, this one's pretty easy and straightforward to take action on. The three national credit bureaus, again, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, are required to provide you with a free copy of your credit report once every 12 months, but you do have to ask for it. And when you get that credit report, you're going to want to look over it. If anything's not correct, you can contact the credit bureau and ask them to fix the information. That can be really helpful because everything's not always completely accurate. There are some free services maybe that come with credit cards that allow you to keep track of your credit score as well. And again, a credit bureau is allowed to report negative information, as long as it's accurate, that will stay on your credit report for 7 years. And in case of bankruptcy, it will last on your credit report for 10 years. And that might seem like a long time, but sometimes we can use the timing to our advantage. So for example, let's say you're trying to buy a car and you need a loan. And 6.5 years ago, you negotiated a settlement on a credit card and you were able to settle it for less than you actually owed. That's going to show up negatively on your credit report. But if we know it's going to fall off after 7 years, that might be helpful in the timing for getting that new car, because it might be beneficial for us to wait 6 months until it falls off before buying that car and obtaining that loan, because chances are we're going to get a better deal. And what about other non-medical bills? How do we deal with that? Especially when dealing with finances in the midst of treatment or when you're experiencing side effects, that can be particularly challenging. So there are things that might be useful to consider. So one would be to set up automatic bill pay online. That way you don't have to worry about if things are being paid. Alternatively, you can consider using your bank's online bill pay system. You just have to make sure you go in and manually pay those, but at least it does keep track of everything that's sent out. Sometimes a bill spreadsheet can be useful, where down one side, it's the bills you have to pay monthly and across are the months of the year. And that way, every time you look at it, you can see what you might be missing or where there's an empty spot that might indicate a missed bill. You might also want to consider appointing a friend or a family member as a financial power of attorney, which we're about to talk about more in a second. And this is part of an estate plan, which we will turn to next. So I don't know that anybody thinks estate planning is a fun thing to think about, but it's important for us all to think about regardless of where we are, what our age is, what our health is. It's important for all of us to have them. And a lot of people mistakenly think that you only need to have an estate plan if you have a lot of money or property, and that's not the case. So we can all benefit from an estate plan. And it's especially important if we have young children or adult children with disabilities who depend on us. And it's all the more important that we have these documents and have them in one place. And it's not easy. It's not easy to discuss issues of mortality and finances. And it's important to remember that there's a lot of good that can come out of it, even though it can be really awkward and potentially painful. It allows you a lot of good opportunities. It allows you the opportunity to express deeply held values and what your personal preferences are. It can also be a great way, or the best way, to protect your family and loved ones from arguing and having to make challenging decisions. So it's actually a very loving thing to do, to have an estate plan. And frankly, it can provide peace of mind, knowing that your loved ones know your wishes and that you're not, that you've tied up all your loose ends. So let's take a look a little bit about what are the types of documents that you would want to include in your estate plan. I'll tell you about each of one briefly, and then we'll look a little bit more in depth. So wills are legal documents that provide instructions for what somebody wants done with their property after their death. It's also a great place to name a guardian for minor children or adult children with developmental disabilities. A trust is a little bit different. It's a document that allows you to hold assets for one or more people. A power of attorney for financial affairs lets you appoint someone who can pay your bills and your rent from your accounts if you're not able to. An advance care directive is a legal document where you can share your preferences and instructions about your medical care in case you become unable to communicate. Pulse are instructions for emergency healthcare providers if you're unable to communicate. And HIPAA is a type of privacy release that allows a loved one to have access to your medical records. So going back to that will, again, it's that legal document that's going to provide for instructions upon what you would want to do with property upon your death, and how you want your maybe a place to name a guardian for minor children. Just so you know, there are some properties that will not be included in a will. For example, if you have a life insurance policy, or maybe on certain retirement plans, you might have a named beneficiary. And if you do have a named beneficiary on that plan, that's where it's going to go to. So you can't name a new one in the will. You'd have to change the beneficiary in that policy. Also keep in mind, with some property, you might have a problem putting it in a will if you're jointly owning it with somebody else. Like if you own, say, your house with a family member. So if an individual is incapacitated, there may also be need to have someone that can handle non-medical decisions. So a power of attorney for financial affairs is a legal document where an individual, known as the principal, names a trusted adult called the agent, and that person's authorized to make financial decisions on behalf of the principal. There are two types of power of attorneys for financial affairs: standing or durable, and springing. A durable or standing power of attorney for financial affairs is going to go into effect as soon as it's signed. So somebody would be able to access your bank accounts immediately. Whereas a springing power of attorney for financial affairs only goes into effect and only if that person or principal becomes incapacitated. So only if I became incapacitated would my agent or power of attorney for financial affairs be able to, say, access my checking account to be able to pay my rent. Something to consider too is that if no specific end date is expressed, the power of attorney for financial affairs is going to end either upon death or when the principal revokes that power, which they can do at any time. And again, some of the duties that the principal can grant an agent can include depositing or withdrawing funds from a bank account, handling personal matters, receiving mail, even making travel arrangements.
Yeah, see, I'm nice.
Watching on Netflix and was mad that it was on.
Any questions so far? Okay. A power of attorney for financial affairs can be really useful, where cancer side effects might lead to incapacitation. So it can be really helpful to know that you have someone who's able to help you in the case that you are incapacitated. Now, the living will, that's probably the best known advance directive. And it's often confused, because it's confusing, with a power of attorney for healthcare. And we're going to talk about both and the difference. Unlike the power of attorney for healthcare, a living will allows someone to express their wishes about their medical care. But you typically do not name an agent in a living will. So generally speaking, a living will is more for narrow circumstances than a power of attorney for healthcare, and would only really apply to life prolonging procedures for an individual unable to make his or own healthcare decisions, and would only come into effect when certain conditions are met. So, for example, a living will may apply to a terminally ill individual. It may not cover a permanently unconscious individual. A living will may also not apply if someone's seriously ill but has a hope of recovery. One thing that's important to note, and I'll talk about this again, is that not all states recognize living wills as valid documents. So for somebody living in New York, for example, their best option would probably be a full power of attorney for healthcare that does name an agent. And to make things a little bit more confusing, but hopefully it'll simplify it, just to know that a power of attorney can be referred to by a lot of different things. Some people say you're appointing a healthcare proxy or healthcare representative. But essentially, the power of attorney for healthcare is where you name an individual, the agent, to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to express your wishes at that time. And some states allow for a very broadly written power of attorney for healthcare that basically gives that agent power to make any and all healthcare decisions for that person. So, for example, that agent might consent or refuse any aggressive medical procedures. They also potentially could have the power to hire or fire medical personnel. They can make decisions about sharing medical records. They can even make decisions about approving blood transfusions. Transfusions. Even in states that allow for really broad power of attorney for healthcare, individuals still can limit their agent's power. So you can provide specific instructions or preferences about your healthcare that the agent would then have to follow. Now, you can also name an alternate agent in case one is unavailable. However, it is not recommended to appoint co-agents. Why is that? Well, the rationale is this, that you have two people with equal decision-making power. That could lead to a lot of conflict and confusion, thereby spoiling the very reason why you created that advance directive in the first place. And just know that some states do restrict the power of attorney for healthcare more than others. But a lot of times this can be a better option for individuals than a living will for the folks who want to state at least some of their preferences in addition to naming an agent. So I think it's easier for me to remember anyway, the advanced healthcare directive is essentially a living will plus a power of attorney for healthcare. It lets me say my wishes for the future and appoint an agent. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about making sure we have adequate storage of our documents. We want to make sure that not only we, but our loved ones can have access to these accounts. A good estate plan is pretty meaningless if no one can find it. So you might want to do that by giving out hard copies or photocopies of important materials to your friends and families. Some folks prefer to store this information online, either in Dropbox or on Google Drive, just to make sure that it is accessible in case of emergency. Like I mentioned, everything is very state specific, and each state has their own estate planning rules. And what would be considered a proper will in one state very well might not be what's considered a proper will in another state. I wanted to point you to some resources that we have on our website. We have an estate planning toolkit. Part 1 of that toolkit tells you some general information, much like some of the things that we've been talking about today. And then part 2 and 3 are state specific. So you could look and find out specifically what the requirements are for your state and the forms that are required for your state, and all of that is free. So some tips, estate planning tips, would be to create a plan that actually works for you. There are some really sophisticated options out there, but I know myself and I might not use it. So I want to make sure that I'm using something that works for me. Another important thing to keep in mind is that you're going to want to review your estate plan regularly. And why would that be? Well, there could be changes. There could be changes in your family. Maybe there's a divorce, or maybe a new being is born into the family. There could be a change to your assets that you want to make note of, a change in your wishes, or maybe you move and live in a different state. You want to make sure that you're looking at it and make sure all of your ducks are in a row. Again, it's super important to make sure that everyone knows where your estate plan is located. Again, it's not going to do any good if nobody can find it. If you put it in a safety deposit box and no one has access to it, no one's going to be looking at that estate plan. You're also going to want to communicate with loved ones ahead of time. For example, like who you're naming as executor of your will, who you're going to appoint as guardian of your minor children, if applicable, and really communicate those things ahead of time. Okay, that's estate planning. I also want to talk a little bit about just some of the everyday things in getting organized that can help take some of the stress off our plate, because even everyday items can be difficult when we're navigating a cancer diagnosis. And I really want to underscore that, we can ask for help from our friends and family. It's okay. Our plates are full. So here are some suggestions. Like, for example, there are organizations, like if you need help with housekeeping, you can contact an organization like Cleaning for a Reason, which provides free cleaning for individuals with a cancer diagnosis. There are also a lot of different ways to ask friends and family to assist and coordinate help. One way might be to have a care calendar so that everybody can check in on one place to see what you need. You can also use apps or old-fashioned means to create a meal train your friends and families can provide. And a lot of people think, well, oh, my friends and family all live far away, so they can't really help me. But that's not true. There are different ways that they can provide groceries from afar. They could do Amazon lists, grocery delivery, or help with meal planning. I also wanted to let you know that sometimes these planners can be a little bit more protective of your privacy. So a lot of people might use Facebook or social media to create a meal train or to share updates. And that's great, but it's not private. So you are letting people know about that diagnosis. So these things can be a little bit helpful if you're trying to protect your privacy. Another concern is around childcare. So I wanted to list some resources, both for looking for professionals and looking for help locally. And We just put it on our website. We have a checklist for parents with young children who have cancer that has a lot of different financial resources on it, including some great suggestions for childcare. Now, I've suggested some ways to enlist help, but sometimes that can be easier said than done. In fact, sometimes in order to effectively be helped, we have to set up some things on our end first. So centralizing information can be critical when you have a lot of people who care about your care and are involved in all the different aspects of your life. So this could be about a caregiver helping you with your medical needs, like getting to appointments or taking medication. This could be about arranging for carpooling with for your kids, with your friends. It takes a lot of energy, mental and physical, to keep people who love you up to date about what's going on in your treatment. So you might want to consider a shared calendar, so everybody knows when your next appointment is. Instead of asking you, they can just look at the calendar. You can also consider using a group text message thread, so that instead of sending a million texts updating people individually, you only have to do it once. Another thing that can another thing that can take up a lot of brain power is making sure you have what you need when you need it. And so, especially when you're in and out of the house or in and out of doctor's appointments or the hospital. And one suggestion is to keep a go bag. That is a term that originates from the military, where they have their packs all ready to go. But I think it's important and helpful for most folks. So what you would keep in that completely depends. Here's a list of some things that you might want to consider. You might want to consider keeping one of these in your car or in your home right by the door, so that if you need to go, you have everything you need all in one place. In addition, sometimes being prepared isn't about having things that you need with you, but making sure the right information is with you. This is especially important in case of emergency. So having emergency information stored on your phone and accessible is a great idea. Some people also have jewelry like rings or bracelets that has important information and instructions on them. Potentially this might mean in order to stay organized, it might mean keeping an email file in your email on the go, since I think everybody probably has, or most people have access to their email through their phone. And I think it can be a great tip to store information in your email, like a list of your medications, a list of supplements and vitamins, a list of contact information for different providers. So that way, when we go, we know we have all of that information. Also, I don't know about you, but I usually have about 100 questions before I go to the doctor, and then I get into the office and I forget them all. So it can be helpful to have a note section in your calendar where you can track all of the questions that you have for your provider. It can also be very helpful to take a picture of your health insurance card, both front and back, and to have that in your phone. That way, if you go into your provider's office and you forgot your card, you do have proof of insurance. I know some of these things sound super obvious, and some of them just sound run of the mill, but a lot of them are helpful, practical tips that can make things just a little less overwhelming. I also realize that was a lot of information and that it might feel overwhelming. And just remember, like everything else in life, it takes practice. So don't give up. When you're starting these things, you're going to keep what works and leave the rest behind. And always know that asking questions and getting help is always going to be the right step in getting organized and moving forward. So some tangible next steps before we look at some questions. I see that there are some in the chat. let's think about our sources of clutter. Everybody might be different. So maybe mine is my mail table or my dining room table. Maybe it's my desktop, as I admitted to you that it is a mess. And then thinking for each source of clutter, what's a system that's going to make the most sense for you? Then what tools you might need for that system. And when we're getting organized, it can be really tempting to try to do everything at once. And a lot of times what we recommend is to implement one system at a time. And also know that sometimes things get worse before they get better. So all the more reason to enlist help. And overall, it can be really easy when frustrated to abandon a system for getting organized, but we want to remember that we want to pivot and not just give up. Before we take some questions, I did want to invite you to one of our triage cancer conferences. Our next one is actually coming up on Friday and Saturday. And this is where we're going to explore topics like the one we did today, but also more in depth about different health insurance and disability insurance. It is a completely free online event. So if you're interested, you can sign up at triagecancer.org/conferences. Would be great to see you there. We also host a monthly webinar series that is free and open to everybody, where we do kind of deep dives on different topics. For example, at the end of the month, we have benefits for veterans with cancer. And in June, a webinar on caregiving. We just did one that's been recorded on estate planning and is available on our website. So know that if you did want to make this or do want to make this, but you miss the webinar, the live webinar, within a few days, we will have it up on our website. Just so you know, and we'll probably talk about this when we answer questions. If you have questions that are specific to your situation, and maybe you go on our website and if the general information is helpful, but you're not exactly sure how it applies to you specifically, we have a legal and financial navigation program where you can speak one-on-one with someone. You can go online to triagecancer.org/get-help. And fill out a brief form, and then you'd get an email and you could schedule a call for a time that works best for you to speak with me or one of my colleagues about your specific situation. We can give you different options that you have. You can kind of rely that we are providing you with accurate information. There's a lot of information out there. Not all of it's accurate, unfortunately, and help empower you to take the next step. So please know that that is available as well. And it looks like we have just a little bit of time for some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces. Okay. Let's see.
Awesome. So I
Yay.
think there were a couple questions. So one of the questions was, can you explain how insurance works when you have two? So I'm assuming you mean like two insurance plans.
Okay. Hang
That,
on.
I'm not sure if that's correct, but
If you have two health insurance plans, typically one is going to be your primary insurance and one is going to be your secondary insurance, which just means that the primary is going to pay first, and then it will go off to the secondary insurance to be processed next. So a common situation where you might see this is if somebody has Medicare, but they're also working. It can depend on which one will pay first, but Medicare might, or your employer health group plan, or vice versa, and then they would be processed by the next one. It's a great question.
the next question was, why would an employer need to check your credit score?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the idea behind that is if you have any kind of financial responsibilities, that you are a financially responsible person. That's as far as specifics. Beyond that, I don't really know. I thankfully have not had to apply for a job where they've had to pull my credit report.
I do know that like certain governmental agencies check.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. That's true.
Working with federal sensitive information, they feel that if you have lots of debt, that you can be bought by 5. That's what I've heard, but
That makes sense. That makes sense. But yeah, also like if you are managing funds for your employer, that's part of your job. They
I don't have a lot of debt, but I can easily be bought too. So I don't, it's true.
That's funny.
Any other questions? Kelly, good to see you. We were just talking about you before you hopped on. Hold on. That's what I was told with my city job. Monique said this is great information. I also thought this was really good information. I don't even have cancer, and I was taking a lot of notes from my personal use. So I'm definitely going to clean out my inbox using that enroll website to clear it out, some of those junk messages.
It's all a work in progress, right? Some of these things that I've implemented, some things, I've tried, have worked, some things don't work. So it really is just a matter of not giving up and trying something else.
I have one more question. I don't know if anyone else has any questions one quick question. Are there any medical services or things that related to your medical treatment that might affect your credit?
Well, any bills that you have might, if you don't pay them, might affect your credit. There have been some changes, thankfully, about what medical debt gets reported to credit agencies. Right now, I believe if it's under $500, I think as of now, that wouldn't be reported to the major 3 credit bureaus. There is some work to getting that figure higher. So usually what's going to affect your credit is your medical bills or what's in collections or what hasn't been paid. Can you be denied credit because of a cancer diagnosis? No, I mean, no, they would not be able to discriminate against you based on a cancer diagnosis. A couple of things to consider here would be, how would they know? And we have a great resource on our website about disclosure and privacy and how to keep those things private. Whether that be your employer or anybody else. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, we have protections to not be discriminated based on disability. So I can't think off the top of my head of a reason you would be denied credit solely based on your cancer diagnosis. As far as I can tell, that's not something that they would look at. They would be checking your credit score and your credit report with those 3 major credit bureaus. And I don't even know how they would have access to that information, except maybe through the medical bills, but certainly it would not be okay for them to discriminate you against that reason.
That's good to know. I know someone that was afraid to disclose or let anyone know they were being treated with cancer because they were afraid of the discrimination.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, because I mean, especially with employment and, especially if you're not sure whether or not, all our legal and financial aid, our financial network or navigation program, sorry, I'm losing my power to speak as the day gets longer. But that's a lot of people think, oh, if I need a reasonable accommodation from my employer, or, oh, if I need to take a leave of absence, I have to tell my employer that I have cancer, and you don't. There are different ways that you can even provide documentation from your medical team without disclosing your diagnosis. And there's more information available about that on our website.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Any other Bernie questions before we let Aaron go?
I was going to say, did she see the aurora borealis? But
I wish I did.
A little levity for the end of the evening. That was a heavy topic for the end of the day, so that was good.
I still haven't seen them. It is my dream that
I know, right?
Yeah. So jealous of friends and family who got to see it.
Yes. All right. This was great. Great information.
All right. So with that being said, thank you all for attending this evening. you know, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to myself. We can connect you with our friends at Triage, and definitely check out their website for the additional resources. I will be sending out the links for the all three of the recordings that we have done so far for this series. And I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Mhm.